Good evening, dear friend, and welcome to a tranquil journey through ancient China. Tonight, we'll explore the serene world of colors so revered that only emperors and deities could claim them, shaping a civilization's heart. This tale is woven to envelop you in calm, like a soft breeze, guiding you into a restful evening. If this story brings you peace, please give it a gentle like or subscribe to our quiet community. I'd love to hear where you're resting tonight. Perhaps a cozy room in Atlanta or a snug corner in Portland. It's heartwarming to know we're gathered from across the world, sharing in this moment of tranquility. Now settle into your favorite spot, let your shoulders relax, take a slow breath, and feel your body sink into the bed, as if cradled by a gentle wave. Allow your mind to drift as we travel back through time, to a world where colors held sacred power. You awaken on a woven bamboo mat, the faint aroma of jasmine and wood smoke curling through the air. A cool breeze slips through a wooden lattice window, carrying the soft hum of a village stirring to life. Your simple linen robe brushes against your skin, and the distant clatter of clay bowls echoes faintly from nearby homes. You're in the Tang Dynasty, around 700 CE, a time when colors held sacred power, and some were forbidden to all but the emperor. As a humble merchant, you move carefully in a world where every hue tells a story of power, of devotion, of the divine order that governs all things. The empire hums with poetry, trade, and art, but colors are tightly controlled, their use a silent thread in the tapestry of life. Tonight, we'll wander through the tranquil world of ancient China, where colors were more than beauty. They were emblems of power, harmony, and the divine. In this golden age of the Tang Dynasty, when poetry flowed like water and trade routes stretched across continents, the very pigments that painted life were governed by laws as ancient as the mountains themselves. Picture, if you will, a civilization where the yellow of autumn leaves could only grace the emperor's robes, where the deep crimson of a sunset was reserved for sacred temples, and where the indigo of a twilight sky marked the clothes of common folk. This was not mere vanity or decoration. These were the colors of cosmic order, each hue a thread in the great tapestry of Confucian hierarchy and celestial harmony. The Tang Dynasty flourished like a garden in eternal spring, its cities jeweled with markets that sparkled with silk and spice, its palaces echoing with the gentle plucking of pipa strings. Yet beneath this cultural vibrancy lay sumptuary laws as precise as the movements of stars, regulations that dictated not just what one could wear, but how one could exist within the great wheel of social order. Let this story unfurl slowly, like a scroll bathed in moonlight, drawing you into a world of quiet wonder where merchants tread carefully through markets painted in acceptable hues, where artisans guard the secrets of forbidden pigments, and where the very air seems touched with the weight of imperial decree. As you settle deeper into comfort, feel the soft embrace of silk against your skin, breathe in the gentle fragrance of sandalwood, and let your mind drift to those ancient streets where every color whispered its own tale of power and reverence. Let's drift into our first chapter, where the story of color begins with the most sacred hue of all. You stand in a bustling market, the scent of roasted chestnuts blending with the warm dust of the road. The morning sun filters through wooden awnings, casting gentle shadows across the cobblestones beneath your feet. As a merchant in this vibrant Tang Dynasty world, you move carefully among the stalls, your simple hemp robe brushing against your legs with each step. The air hums with quiet activity, the soft murmur of negotiations, the gentle clink of copper coins, and the distant sound of a bamboo flute drifting from somewhere beyond the market's edge. You pause beside a silk merchant's stall, watching as he carefully unfolds bolts of fabric, each one catching the light like captured moonbeams. But there's something you notice immediately, something that makes you lower your gaze respectfully. Not a single thread of yellow graces his display. The silks shimmer in blues deep as midnight rivers, greens like spring bamboo, and whites pure as mountain snow. Yet yellow, that most radiant of colors, is nowhere to be seen. This absence tells a story more profound than any color's presence could. In the distance, a soft commotion stirs the market. Voices hush to whispers, and merchants bow their heads as a procession approaches. You feel it before you see it, a presence that seems to make the very air shimmer with reverence. The emperor's palanquin moves slowly through the crowd, carried by bearers whose feet barely seem to touch the ground. And there it is, yellow in all its forbidden glory. The emperor's robes flow like liquid sunlight, each fold catching and releasing golden fire. The silk is so fine it seems to breathe with his movement, and the yellow so pure it appears to glow from within. This is not the pale yellow of wheat or the bright yellow of spring flowers. This is the yellow of the earth itself, the color of the center of all things, the hue that connects heaven and earth in perfect harmony. You watch, transfixed, as the procession passes. The emperor's yellow robes seem to carry the weight of centuries, each thread woven with the authority of the divine. Around him, his attendants wear robes of deep purple and rich crimson, colors that speak of high rank, but pale in comparison to the sacred yellow that marks him as the son of heaven. As the palanquin disappears around a corner, you hear an elderly merchant beside you whisper to his companion, "The color of the Middle Kingdom's heart. To wear it without permission." He doesn't finish the sentence, but the weight of his words hangs in the air like incense. You understand now why the silk merchant's stall holds no yellow. This color belongs to one man alone, chosen by the heavens to rule over all beneath the sky. In the philosophy of the 5 elements that governs all life in the empire, yellow represents earth, the center around which all other elements revolve. Just as the earth supports all life, so does the emperor support the empire, and his yellow robes are the visible symbol of this cosmic responsibility. The production of imperial yellow is itself a sacred art. Deep in the palace workshops, master dyers work with turmeric and gardenia flowers, their hands stained golden from years of service. They guard their techniques like precious secrets, for they know that each yard of imperial yellow silk they create carries the power of the throne itself. You've heard whispers of the laws that govern color in the empire. The sumptuary laws, they call them, rules that dictate not just what people may wear, but what they may dream of wearing. For you, as a merchant, certain colors are forbidden not just by law, but by the very order of the universe. To wear yellow would be to claim a connection to the divine that you do not possess, to upset the careful balance that keeps the world in harmony. In your travels along the trade routes, you've seen how other lands treat color, as decoration, as beauty, as simple preference. But here in the Middle Kingdom, color is language, status, and spiritual truth all woven into one. The emperor's yellow speaks of his mandate from heaven, his role as the bridge between the earthly and the divine. As you continue through the market, you notice how the other merchants unconsciously arrange their goods. Blues and greens cluster together, browns and grays form their own quiet corners, but nowhere, do you see even a hint of that sacred yellow. It's as if an invisible hand has swept all traces of it away, leaving only the memory of the emperor's passing brilliance. The afternoon sun begins to slant lower, casting longer shadows across the market square. You purchase some indigo cloth, a color safe for merchants like yourself, and prepare to continue your journey. But as you walk, you carry with you the image of those golden robes, the way they seem to hold the light of the sun itself, and the profound respect that single color commands in this ancient land. The market sounds fade behind you as you head toward the city gates. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell chimes softly, its bronze voice carrying across the rooftops. You think about the emperor in his palace, surrounded by the golden threads of his authority, and you understand that in this world, some colors are too sacred for ordinary hands to touch. As the market quiets and the shadows lengthen, the story shifts to another sacred hue, one that burns as bright as the emperor's yellow, but carries its own divine power through the temples and sacred spaces of the realm. You walk a stone path to a temple, the air thick with incense and the glow of red pillars rising like ancient sentinels in the morning mist. Your sandals whisper against the worn stones, each step carrying you deeper into a world where color holds the power to bridge the earthly and the divine. The path winds gently upward, flanked by cypress trees whose dark green branches seem to bow in reverence to the sacred space ahead. As you approach the temple gates, the first thing that strikes you is the color that dominates everything. Vermilion red, deep and rich as the heart's blood, painting every pillar, every beam, every surface that frames the sacred space. This is not the cheerful red of festival banners or the warm red of autumn leaves. This is vermilion, the color of spiritual power, of protection, of the very essence of life itself. The temple gates tower above you, their vermilion surface gleaming like liquid fire in the soft light. You pause before entering, watching as wisps of incense smoke curl upward from bronze censers, carrying the prayers of the faithful toward heaven. The smoke seems to dance with the red pillars, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow that make the entire structure appear to breathe with quiet life. A gentle breeze carries the scent of sandalwood and jasmine from the temple courtyard, mingling with the earthier smell of the cinnabar that creates this sacred color. You've heard the stories whispered in the markets, how vermilion is ground from cinnabar ore, that mystical red stone that the ancients believed contained the essence of immortality itself. The very substance from which this color comes is considered so powerful that only the most skilled artisans are trusted to work with it. As you step through the gates, the sound of your footsteps seems to be absorbed by the peaceful atmosphere. The courtyard opens before you, paved with gray stones that provide a perfect contrast to the vermilion that surrounds you on all sides. Every pillar, every rafter, every decorative element glows with that same deep red, creating a sense of unity and harmony that seems to pulse with its own rhythm. In the distance, you hear the soft chanting of monks, their voices rising and falling like a gentle tide. The sound seems to emerge from the very walls themselves, as if the vermilion paint has absorbed centuries of prayer and now releases it back into the world in an endless cycle of devotion. You find yourself walking more slowly, your breathing naturally adjusting to match the peaceful cadence of the chants. The main hall of the temple rises before you, its vermilion columns stretching upward like the trunks of sacred trees. Each pillar is carved with intricate designs. Dragons that seem to swim through clouds, phoenixes that appear ready to take flight, and lotus blossoms that bloom eternally in the red-painted wood. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, but it's the color that brings it all to life, that makes each carving seem to move in the shifting light. You notice how the vermilion seems to change throughout the day. In the morning light, it appears warm and welcoming, like the glow of a hearth fire. As the sun climbs higher, the red deepens, becoming more intense, more commanding. By evening, it will appear to burn with an inner fire, as if the very pillars are channels for some divine flame. Inside the temple, the atmosphere grows even more profound. The vermilion continues here, but it's joined by gold leaf that catches the light from hanging lanterns, creating a space that seems to exist somewhere between the earthly and the celestial. The Buddha statue at the center of the hall is painted in gold, but it sits upon a vermilion lotus throne, the red petals seeming to support the golden figure with their spiritual power. You watch as an elderly woman approaches the altar, her gray robes a stark contrast to the surrounding red. She carries a small offering of fruit, placing it carefully on the vermilion-painted altar table. As she kneels in prayer, the red surrounds her like a protective embrace, and you understand why this color is considered so sacred. It doesn't just decorate the temple, it sanctifies it, transforms it into a space where the divine can dwell among mortals. The creation of vermilion is itself a sacred process. In workshops hidden away from common eyes, master craftsmen grind cinnabar ore into fine powder, mixing it with oils and binding agents according to recipes passed down through generations. The process is slow, meditative, almost ritualistic. Each batch of vermilion must be perfect, for it will be used to paint the homes of gods and emperors, to create the visual language through which the divine communicates with the mortal world. You've learned that vermilion is restricted not just by law, but by spiritual necessity. Common people may not use this color in their homes or clothing, not because the emperor wishes to hoard its beauty, but because vermilion carries spiritual weight that untrained souls cannot bear. To paint your humble dwelling in vermilion would be like claiming to house a god, a presumption that could upset the delicate balance between heaven and earth. As you wander through the temple complex, you notice how vermilion appears in different contexts. The main pillars are painted in the deepest, most intense shade, reserved for the most sacred spaces. Secondary buildings use lighter tones, creating a hierarchy of spiritual significance that guides visitors naturally toward the most important areas. Even the handrails of bridges over the temple's ornamental ponds are painted in vermilion, blessing those who touch them with the color's protective power. The afternoon sun slants through the temple windows, casting geometric patterns of light and shadow across the vermilion surfaces. You sit on a stone bench in the courtyard, watching as the light moves slowly across the painted columns, revealing new details in the carved decorations with each passing moment. The color seems alive, responding to the changing light like a living thing. A young monk approaches, his saffron robes creating a beautiful contrast with the vermilion background. He moves with the quiet grace of one who has spent years in this colorful sanctuary, someone who understands the spiritual language written in red across every surface. He nods to you respectfully, and you notice how the vermilion seems to enhance his presence, making him appear more serene, more connected to the divine purpose of this place. The temple bell chimes softly, its bronze voice carrying across the courtyard and beyond the walls to the city below. The sound seems to awaken something in the vermilion paint, making it appear to pulse gently with each toll. You understand now why this color is so carefully controlled, why its use is limited to temples and palaces. Vermilion doesn't just decorate, it transforms, elevates, sanctifies whatever it touches. As evening approaches, the vermilion begins to deepen, taking on the qualities of glowing embers. The temple lanterns are lit, their warm yellow light mixing with the red surfaces to create an atmosphere of profound peace and spiritual power. You realize that vermilion is not just a color here. It's a prayer made visible, a bridge between the human world and the realm of the gods. The incense smoke continues to rise, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of countless visitors. The vermilion pillars stand like eternal guardians, their red surfaces holding the accumulated prayers of centuries. As you prepare to leave this sacred space, you carry with you the image of that divine red, the way it seems to hold light and life and spiritual power in its very essence. As the temple fades into dusk, another color beckons from the everyday world of those who work with their hands. A color that speaks not of divine power, but of honest labor and the simple beauty of daily life. You sit by a riverbank, watching a dyer rinse blue cloth in the gentle current, the water rippling with faint traces of indigo that catch the afternoon light like scattered sapphires. The scene before you is one of simple beauty, a world away from the golden robes of emperors and the vermilion pillars of temples. Here, beside this peaceful stream, you witness the honest work of common folk, their hands stained the deep blue of indigo, their craft passed down through generations like a treasured family heirloom. The dyer kneels at the water's edge, his weathered hands guiding lengths of hemp cloth through the cool current. Each piece of fabric emerges from the water transformed, the pale fibers now carrying the deep, rich blue that will clothe farmers, artisans, and merchants like yourself. His movements are rhythmic, almost meditative, as if the act of dyeing has become a form of prayer, a communion with the ancient traditions that connect him to countless generations of craftsmen. You notice how different this scene is from the restricted world of imperial yellow and sacred vermilion. There are no guards here, no laws preventing the use of this color. Indigo belongs to the people, to those who work the land, who craft with their hands, who build the empire's foundation through honest labor. The blue that flows through the water speaks of accessibility, of a beauty that can be shared by all who need it. The dyer's workshop sits a short distance from the river, its wooden walls weathered to a soft gray by years of sun and rain. Outside, bamboo poles support lengths of drying cloth that flutter in the breeze like prayer flags, each one painted in various shades of blue, from the palest sky blue to the deepest indigo that rivals the color of midnight. The sight creates a symphony of movement and color, a dance of fabric and wind that seems to celebrate the simple joy of creation. As you approach the workshop, the scent of fermenting indigo reaches you, earthy, organic, somehow comforting in its familiarity. This is not the precious, guarded fragrance of imperial workshops, but the honest smell of work, of transformation, of plants giving up their essence to create something beautiful and useful. The indigo vats sit in the shade of the building, their surfaces covered with a foam that shifts from blue to green to purple as the light changes. Inside the workshop, the dyer's family works together in quiet harmony. His wife sorts dried indigo leaves, her fingers stained blue from years of handling the precious plant. Their daughter, perhaps 12 years old, helps to prepare the fiber, combing through hemp strands with the patience of someone who has grown up understanding that good work cannot be rushed. Their son tends the fires beneath the dye vats, keeping the temperature just right for the chemical magic that transforms colorless cloth into brilliant blue. You watch as the master dyer explains his process, his voice carrying the pride of someone who has perfected his craft through decades of practice. The indigo plant, he tells you, must be harvested at just the right time, when the leaves hold the maximum amount of the compounds that will create the dye. The leaves are then fermented in earthenware jars, a process that can take weeks and requires constant attention to temperature, moisture, and timing. The creation of indigo dye is both art and science, requiring knowledge passed down through families like yours. The fermentation process creates a living dye, one that must be carefully tended like a garden. Too much heat, and the delicate chemical compounds will be destroyed. Too little, and the fermentation will fail, leaving only worthless liquid. The dyer's expertise lies in reading the subtle signs, the color of the foam, the scent of the mixture, the way the liquid moves when stirred. Unlike the precious cinnabar that creates vermilion or the exotic materials needed for imperial yellow, indigo grows readily in the fields around the village. Farmers cultivate it alongside their food crops, harvesting the leaves with the same care they give to rice or millet. This accessibility makes indigo the color of the people, the hue that connects all classes below the imperial court in a shared experience of blue. You observe how the dyer tests his work, dipping small samples of cloth into the vat and lifting them to catch the light. The fabric emerges green at first, but as the air touches it, a transformation occurs. The green gradually shifts to blue, deepening and intensifying until it reaches the desired shade. This magical change never fails to inspire wonder, even among those who witness it daily. The cloth seems to be painting itself, drawing color from the very air. The gradations of blue available to common people tell their own stories. The deepest indigo, achieved through multiple dippings, is reserved for special occasions: wedding robes, festival garments, the clothing worn to important ceremonies. Lighter blues serve for everyday wear, practical and beautiful in their simplicity. The palest blue, almost gray, is used for children's clothing and work garments, colors that can hide the stains of daily life while still carrying the beauty of the dye. As the afternoon progresses, you help the dyer carry wet cloth to the drying area. The fabric is surprisingly heavy, saturated with water and dye, and you understand why this work builds strong arms and patient hearts. Each piece must be handled carefully, spread evenly on the bamboo poles to prevent wrinkles or uneven drying. The physical labor involved in creating beauty becomes apparent in every movement, every careful adjustment of the cloth. The economic importance of indigo extends far beyond its beauty. For families like the dyers, the cultivation and processing of indigo provides a steady income, a way to participate in the empire's economy while remaining rooted in their village. The cloth they produce will travel to markets throughout the region, carrying with it the skill and dedication of their hands. Unlike the precious colors reserved for the elite, indigo represents opportunity for advancement through honest work. You notice how the blue cloth seems to harmonize with the natural world around it. The color echoes the sky reflected in the river, the shadows cast by mountains in the distance, the deep blue of twilight settling over the landscape. Indigo doesn't compete with nature. It complements it, creating a visual language that speaks of humanity's place within the natural order rather than above it. The dyer's elderly father joins you by the river, his hands so permanently stained with indigo that the blue seems to have become part of his skin. He speaks of the philosophy behind his craft, how the color blue represents the endless sky, the depths of water, the vastness of possibility. Unlike the earthbound yellow of the emperor or the spiritual fire of vermilion, blue speaks of freedom, of horizons that extend beyond the immediate world. As evening approaches, the family gathers for their simple meal. Their blue-stained hands handle plain ceramic bowls, and you notice how the color of their clothing creates a harmony with the fading light. There's a contentment here, a satisfaction that comes from work well done, from beauty created through honest effort. The indigo that surrounds them speaks not of power or spiritual authority, but of dignity, of the quiet pride that comes from skilled craftsmanship. The river continues to flow beside the workshop, carrying away the last traces of the day's dyeing. Tomorrow will bring new cloth to be transformed, new opportunities to create beauty from simple materials. The indigo workshop represents the heart of the empire's economic life. Not the grand ceremonies of the court, but the steady, patient work of those who create the everyday miracles that sustain civilization. As the cloth dries in the breeze, we drift to a wider world, where merchants and traders carry these humble blues alongside precious goods from distant lands, and where the simple indigo of village workshops meets the exotic colors of the Silk Road. You join a caravan, the creak of wooden carts mingling with the scent of saffron and distant spices as the great trading procession prepares to depart at dawn. The air is crisp with morning mist, and the excitement of merchants and travelers creates a gentle hum of anticipation that seems to vibrate through the very earth beneath your feet. Your own cart, laden with bolts of indigo cloth from the village workshop, sits among dozens of others, each one carrying treasures that will transform the empire's understanding of color itself. The caravan master, a weathered man whose eyes have seen the farthest reaches of the known world, calls out in his deep voice, and the great procession begins to move. Camels laden with precious cargo sway rhythmically as they find their walking pace, their bells creating a gentle melody that will accompany you for countless miles. The sound mingles with the creak of wooden wheels, the soft conversations of fellow travelers, and the distant call of birds awakening to greet the day. As you settle into the rhythm of travel, you marvel at the wealth of colors surrounding you. Unlike the carefully regulated palette of the imperial court or the humble blues of village workshops, the caravan carries hues from across the known world. Bales of silk shimmer in shades you've never seen before, deep purples that seem to hold the mystery of distant mountains, greens that rival the most precious jade, and reds that burn with the intensity of foreign sunsets. Your fellow merchant, a man who has traveled this route for 20 years, points to a carefully wrapped bundle secured near the front of a camel's load. Saffron, he says, his voice carrying the reverence reserved for the most precious commodities. From the western lands, where they cultivate flowers that bloom only briefly each year. Each thread of saffron represents hours of careful work, hands that have plucked thousands of delicate stamens to create that golden treasure. The saffron, you learn, will be used to create yellows that rival even the imperial shade in their intensity and purity. But these foreign yellows carry different meanings, different restrictions. They speak of distant lands and exotic origins, rather than the earthbound authority of the emperor's traditional yellow. The imperial court must carefully regulate these new colors, determining which may be used freely and which must be restricted to preserve the symbolic power of traditional hues. As the caravan moves along the ancient road, you observe how the landscape itself seems to change the colors around you. The silk that appeared deep blue in the morning light now takes on purple undertones in the afternoon sun. The saffron-dyed cloth shifts from golden yellow to warm orange as the day progresses. You begin to understand how the merchants of the Silk Road must be not just traders, but students of light and color, learning how their precious goods will appear in different climates and conditions. The road leads through landscapes that seem painted by the gods themselves. Red sandstone cliffs tower above the caravan, their surfaces carved by wind and time into patterns that echo the designs found on precious fabrics. Golden desert sands stretch toward horizons that shimmer with heat, creating an ever-changing canvas against which the caravan's colors seem to dance. In the distance, mountains rise like purple shadows, their peaks touched with snow that gleams white as the finest silk. At midday, the caravan stops at a trading post, an oasis of activity in the vast landscape. Here, you witness the true international nature of the color trade. Merchants from the western regions display carpets woven in patterns that seem to move in the shifting light, their colors deep and rich as jewels. Persian traders offer powders and dyes in small ceramic jars, each one containing pigments that could transform entire bolts of cloth into masterworks of color. You watch as a merchant from the far west demonstrates his wares, mixing a small amount of purple powder with oil to create a paint that seems to glow with inner light. The color is unlike anything produced in the empire, deeper than any indigenous purple, more intense than the colors extracted from local plants. The other merchants gather around, their faces showing the mixture of desire and calculation that marks successful traders. The Western merchant explains, through gestures and the few words of Chinese he has learned, that this purple comes from shellfish harvested in distant seas. Thousands of shells must be gathered and processed to create even a small amount of the precious dye. The labor involved is enormous, and the cost is prohibitive for all but the wealthiest customers. Yet the result is a color that seems to capture the very essence of royalty, a purple so rich and deep that it demands respect from all who see it. As the afternoon progresses, you learn about the complex negotiations that surround these exotic colors. The imperial court maintains strict control over which foreign dyes may be imported and how they may be used. Some colors are deemed too similar to imperial yellow or sacred vermilion and are banned entirely. Others are permitted but heavily taxed, their use limited to specific occasions or social classes. The merchants must navigate these restrictions carefully, understanding not just the market value of their goods, but their political and cultural significance. The caravan includes officials from the imperial court, men whose job is to inspect and regulate the color trade. They move through the goods with practiced eyes, identifying dyes and pigments that might threaten the symbolic power of traditional colors. Their presence adds a layer of complexity to every transaction, requiring merchants to be diplomats as well as traders. You notice how the foreign merchants adapt their offerings to meet imperial requirements. A trader from the southern regions shows you how he blends local indigo with imported materials to create new shades of blue that satisfy both the court's restrictions and the market's desire for novelty. His innovation represents the creative spirit of the Silk Road, where traditional techniques merge with foreign knowledge to create something entirely new. As evening approaches, the caravan makes camp in a sheltered valley. The setting sun transforms the landscape into a living demonstration of color theory, painting the sky in shades that shift from golden yellow through deep orange to purple and finally to the deep blue of night. The merchants' goods seem to respond to this natural light show, their colors deepening and shifting as the light changes. Around the campfire, the merchants share stories of their travels, each tale colored by the experiences of those who have dedicated their lives to the pursuit of beauty through color. A silk trader speaks of mountain passes where the snow is so pure it makes white silk appear gray by comparison. A spice merchant describes markets where the air itself seems tinted by the powders and dyes on display, creating an atmosphere of perpetual rainbow. The fire crackles softly, casting dancing shadows that make the bales of colored goods seem to move and breathe in the flickering light. You understand now how the Silk Road serves not just as a conduit for trade, but as a bridge between different understandings of color and beauty. Each merchant carries not just goods, but cultural knowledge, techniques, and traditions that will slowly transform the empire's relationship with color. The night deepens, and the stars emerge in patterns that seem to echo the designs woven into the precious fabrics surrounding you. The caravan settles into the quiet rhythm of evening, with guards posted to watch over the precious cargo and merchants settling into their bedrolls to dream of markets and profits. The colors that have traveled thousands of miles rest quietly in the darkness, awaiting their transformation into garments, decorations, and works of art. As the caravan rests under the star-filled sky, we turn our attention to the skilled hands that will transform these precious materials, to the artisans whose knowledge and dedication will convert raw pigments into the colors that will paint the empire's future. You enter a quiet workshop, the earthy smell of crushed roots filling the air like incense in a temple dedicated to the ancient art of color creation. The morning light filters through latticed windows, casting geometric shadows across workbenches covered with mortars, pestles, and ceramic vessels that hold the secrets of centuries-old craft. Here, in this sanctuary of skilled hands and patient knowledge, the raw materials from distant lands and local fields are transformed into the colors that will paint the empire's daily life. The master dyer, a woman whose hair has turned silver from decades of working with mineral dusts and plant extracts, greets you with hands permanently stained in a rainbow of hues. Her fingers tell the story of her craft, purple beneath the nails from crushing madder roots, yellow creases from handling turmeric, blue lines from years of working with indigo. She moves through her workshop with the confidence of someone who has made thousands of small miracles, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary through knowledge passed down through generations of skilled artisans. The workshop itself is a testament to the complexity of color creation. Along the walls, shelves hold hundreds of ceramic jars, each one labeled with characters that identify its contents: dried flowers, ground minerals, tree barks, and roots from plants that grow in specific regions under particular conditions. The arrangement follows a logic known only to the master craftsperson. a system that allows her to create any color in the spectrum from these humble materials. You watch as she begins her morning's work, selecting ingredients with the precision of a physician preparing medicines. From one jar, she removes dried safflower petals, their papery texture rustling like whispered secrets. From another, she takes pieces of Brazil wood, each fragment carefully cut to maximize the dye potential locked within its fibers. The process begins with the simple act of crushing, but you quickly realize that nothing about this craft is truly simple. The grinding of materials creates its own rhythm, a steady percussion that seems to awaken the colors sleeping within the raw ingredients. As the master dyer works her pestle against the mortar, the safflower petals release their essence, gradually transforming from dried flowers into a powder that holds the promise of brilliant red. The smell changes too, becoming more concentrated, more complex, as if the very act of grinding releases not just pigment, but the memories of sunshine and rain that helped create the original plant. Steam rises from a series of pots arranged over carefully tended fires, each one containing a different stage of the dyeing process. In the first pot, madder roots simmer slowly, their cooking liquid gradually darkening from clear water to deep red wine. The master dyer explains that temperature is crucial. Too hot, and the delicate compounds that create the color will be destroyed. Too cool, and the extraction will be incomplete, leaving precious pigment locked within the plant material. The second pot contains what appears to be ordinary tree bark, but as it cooks, the water takes on a rich brown color that will eventually be transformed into deep purple through the addition of iron-rich water from a specific mountain spring. The process requires patience, sometimes taking days to complete, as the artisan waits for the exact moment when the extraction is perfect, when the maximum amount of color has been drawn from the raw materials. You observe the testing process, watching as the master dyer dips small pieces of silk into each pot, lifting them to examine the color in the changing light. Her trained eye can detect subtleties that escape untrained observation. The difference between a red that will fade quickly and one that will last for generations, the distinction between a blue that will remain true and one that will shift to green over time. This knowledge comes from years of experience, from keeping careful records of which combinations work and which fail. The workshop contains not just the tools of dyeing, but the instruments of precision that separate master craftspeople from mere workers. Scales accurate to the smallest measurements ensure that recipes can be repeated exactly, that the brilliant blue created last month can be matched perfectly today. Measuring cups calibrated for specific volumes allow the precise dilution of concentrated dyes. Even the water used in the process is carefully selected, drawn from sources known to enhance rather than interfere with the chemical reactions that create color. As the morning progresses, you witness the transformation of yellow into gold through the addition of a small amount of copper-bearing water. The change is subtle but dramatic, elevating a simple plant-based dye into something that seems to glow with inner light. The master dyer explains that such refinements are what separate her work from the simple dyeing done in village workshops. Every color can be improved, intensified, and made more permanent through the application of knowledge and skill. The creation of purple demonstrates the highest level of artisanal skill. Starting with red dye extracted from madder roots, the master craftsperson gradually adds blue obtained from indigo, monitoring the mixture carefully as it transforms. The proportions must be exact, the temperature controlled, the timing perfect. Too much blue, and the purple becomes muddy. Too little, and it remains merely a pale red. The perfect purple seems to vibrate with color, appearing almost to emit light rather than simply reflect it. You notice how the artisan's movements become more deliberate, more ceremonial, as she works with the most precious materials. When handling cinnabar for creating vermilion, she works with the reverence of a priest performing sacred rituals. The mineral must be ground for hours to achieve the proper fineness, and the grinding must be done with specific tools that will not contaminate the pure red of the final product. The resulting vermilion will be used in temples and palaces, carrying with it the devotion and skill of its creator. The workshop also serves as a library of color knowledge, with bound volumes containing records of successful dye recipes, notes on seasonal variations in plant materials, and observations about how different fibers accept color. These books represent generations of accumulated wisdom, carefully preserved and slowly expanded by each master who works in this space. The knowledge contained within these pages is more valuable than gold, representing the collective experience of countless artisans who have dedicated their lives to understanding color. As afternoon arrives, the master dyer demonstrates the process of creating compound colors, hues that require multiple dyeing sessions to achieve their final form. A piece of silk is first dyed yellow with turmeric, then overdyed with indigo to create a green that cannot be achieved through any single dye source. The process requires perfect timing, as each color must be completely set before the next is applied. The result is a green so vibrant it seems to capture the essence of spring bamboo leaves. The economic importance of this craft extends far beyond its artistic value. The master dyer explains how her workshop serves not just local merchants, but traders from across the empire. Each color she creates represents potential profit for those who commission her work, but also represents the continuation of cultural traditions that connect the present to the ancient past. The techniques she uses have been refined over centuries, each generation adding its own innovations while preserving the essential knowledge of their predecessors. The workshop falls quiet as the day's major work is completed. The master dyer sits at her workbench, carefully recording the day's activities in her ledger. Each successful batch of dye is documented, and its recipe is preserved for future use. Failed experiments are noted too, their lessons as valuable as their successes. This careful record-keeping ensures that the knowledge gained through years of practice will not be lost, that future generations of artisans will build upon the foundation laid by their predecessors. As evening approaches, the colors created during the day rest in their containers, slowly developing their final hues through the mysterious processes that transform raw materials into finished dyes. The workshop settles into the peaceful rhythm of evening, with the day's work complete and tomorrow's possibilities waiting to be explored. The master dyer's hands, stained with the colors of her craft, rest finally after a day of creating beauty from the humblest materials. As the dye cools and settles, the story drifts to the emperor's court, where these precious colors will be transformed into garments that speak of power, authority, and the divine mandate that governs the empire from its golden throne. You stand in the palace courtyard, silk robes glowing softly in the morning light, as the gentle rustle of fabric mingles with the distant sound of temple bells. The air carries the faint scent of sandalwood and chrysanthemum blossoms, and somewhere in the distance, a flute plays a melody so soft it seems to drift on the breeze itself. As a humble merchant, you've been granted the rare privilege of witnessing the emperor's morning procession, a moment when the very embodiment of heaven walks among mortals. The courtyard stretches before you like a sea of polished stone, each tile reflecting the pale golden light of dawn. Palace servants move with the quiet grace of shadows, their own robes carefully chosen in muted earth tones, browns and soft grays that speak of their station without challenging the cosmic order. The morning air is cool against your skin, carrying with it the whispered conversations of court officials and the gentle clinking of jade ornaments. You pull your own simple hemp robe closer, feeling the rough texture against your fingers, a stark reminder of the world of difference between your clothes and what you're about to witness. Then, like the sun breaking through morning mist, the emperor appears. The first thing that strikes you is not his face, but the luminous yellow of his robes. It's not the pale yellow of spring flowers or the bright yellow of summer wheat. This is the yellow of the earth itself, the golden heart of the world made manifest in silk. The fabric seems to hold light within its very fibers, as if woven from captured sunbeams and the dreams of ancient dragons. His outer robe flows like liquid gold, each fold catching and releasing light with his measured steps. The silk whispers against itself, a sound softer than wind through bamboo leaves, yet somehow more profound. You watch, transfixed, as the emperor moves with the unhurried grace of one who carries the mandate of heaven upon his shoulders. The yellow of his robes is not merely a color. It is the color of the center, the hue of the earth element in the great cosmic dance of existence. In the philosophy that governs this empire, yellow represents the stability of the earth, the unwavering center around which all other elements revolve. Wood feeds fire, fire creates earth, earth bears metal, metal collects water, and water nourishes wood. But Earth remains constant, eternal, the foundation upon which all life depends. As the emperor draws closer, you notice the intricate embroidery that adorns his robes. Dragons twist and coil across the fabric in threads of gold so fine they seem to move with his breathing. Each dragon has 5 claws, a detail reserved solely for the emperor himself. Even his sons, the princes, must content themselves with dragons bearing only 4 claws, for to exceed this number would be to challenge the very order of heaven. The morning light catches the metallic threads, sending tiny sparks of brilliance dancing across the courtyard stones. You think of the countless hours that master embroiderers spent creating these garments, their fingers working by lamplight, their eyes straining to achieve perfection in every stitch. The silk itself likely traveled thousands of miles along the great trade routes, carried by caravans through deserts and over mountain passes, its yellow dye derived from the precious turmeric root and saffron threads that cost more than most families see in a lifetime. Beneath the outer robe, glimpses of purple silk emerge, another color forbidden to all but the emperor and his closest family. This purple speaks of wisdom and spiritual power, dyed with the rarest mollusks brought from distant shores. The combination of yellow and purple creates a harmony that seems to sing silently in the morning air, a visual poem about the balance between earthly authority and heavenly wisdom. The emperor's sleeves flow like water as he raises his hand in a gesture of acknowledgement to his assembled court. The silk fabric pools and gathers with each movement, creating shadows and highlights that shift like living things. You find yourself mesmerized by the way the light plays across the folds, how each gesture sends ripples of color through the fabric like stones dropped in a still pond. Around his waist, a belt of deepest jade holds his robes in place, the green stone catching the morning light and throwing it back in flashes of forest-deep color. Even this accessory speaks of imperial power. Jade represents immortality and perfection, its cool surface a reminder of the emperor's connection to the eternal forces that govern the universe. As the procession moves past, you notice the way the emperor's robes seem to transform the very air around him. The yellow silk creates a warm glow that makes the morning light richer, more golden. It's as if he carries his own small sun within the fabric, illuminating everything nearby with a gentle radiance that speaks of divine favor and earthly abundance. The train of his outer robe follows behind him like a river of molten gold, tended by silent servants who ensure not a single fold goes astray. The silk whispers against the stone courtyard, a sound that seems to echo with the voices of all the silkworms who gave their lives for this moment, all the dyers who perfected their craft, all the weavers who spent their days creating something worthy of heaven's representative on earth. You watch as the emperor pauses before a group of visiting dignitaries, his robes settling around him like petals of some enormous golden flower. The way he moves speaks of generations of training, of lessons learned from childhood about the weight of symbolic power. Every gesture is deliberate, every fold of fabric meaningful. His robes are not merely clothing. They are a living testament to the cosmic order, a visual reminder that some powers are too great, too sacred, to be shared with ordinary mortals. The purple silk visible at his collar and cuffs creates a striking contrast against the dominant yellow, like a twilight sky against a golden sunset. This combination has been carefully chosen to represent the emperor's dual nature, earthly ruler and heavenly son, grounded in the practical needs of his people, yet elevated to a plane where mortal concerns fade into the greater pattern of existence. As the morning progresses and the emperor continues his ritual movements through the courtyard, you become aware of how the colors of his robes seem to change with the shifting light. What appeared as pure gold in the early dawn now shows hints of amber and honey, while the purple depths reveal traces of indigo and wine. The silk lives and breathes with each movement, a masterpiece of human craft elevated to the level of divine art. The emperor's presence transforms the entire courtyard into a stage for this daily performance of power and beauty. The carefully arranged flowering trees, the polished stones, the distant mountains visible beyond the palace walls. All of these elements seem to exist solely to frame and highlight the magnificence of his robes. The yellow silk becomes the center around which the entire world revolves, just as the emperor himself serves as the axis of the great empire. You think of your own simple merchant's garments, dyed in the plain browns and grays permitted to your station. There's comfort in this simplicity, a freedom from the weight of symbolic meaning that the emperor must carry with every thread of his clothing. Yet watching him move through the courtyard, you can't help but feel moved by the profound beauty of it all. The way centuries of tradition and craftsmanship have combined to create something that transcends mere fabric and becomes a living symbol of harmony between heaven and earth. As the emperor's procession finally passes from view, the courtyard seems somehow dimmer, as if the very light has followed him into the inner palace. The morning breeze stirs the flowering trees, and you catch one last glimpse of yellow silk disappearing through an ornate doorway, leaving behind only the memory of gold and the gentle whisper of silk against stone. As the emperor retires to his private chambers, the golden glow of his robes fading like sunset behind palace walls, we turn our attention to the intricate laws that govern this world of color, where even the humblest dye carries the weight of imperial decree. You sit in a quiet tea-house, overhearing soft whispers of forbidden hues, as the gentle steam from your cup mingles with the afternoon light filtering through paper screens. The air carries the delicate fragrance of jasmine tea and the faint rustle of silk robes as patrons move carefully through the dimly lit space. The tea-house rests in a narrow alley between two larger streets, its wooden beams weathered smooth by countless seasons. Paper lanterns cast a warm amber glow over the low tables, and the soft murmur of conversation creates a blanket of sound that feels almost like a lullaby. You wrap your fingers around the warm ceramic cup, feeling the heat seep through your palms as you listen to the stories that drift through the air like incense smoke. At the table beside you, two silk merchants speak in hushed tones about a recent incident at the Western Gate. A traveling performer had been stopped by imperial guards, his costume confiscated for bearing threads of yellow that caught the sunlight too boldly. The merchants shake their heads with the weary knowledge of those who navigate these treacherous waters daily, their own robes carefully chosen in the safe grays and browns that mark their acceptable station. The laws that govern color in this empire are as intricate as the patterns woven into the finest silk, and just as carefully maintained. Every hue carries meaning, every shade speaks of status, and every thread tells a story of power and submission. These are not merely rules written on scrolls and filed away in dusty archives. They are living principles that shape the very fabric of society, woven into the daily lives of millions like threads in an endless tapestry. You sip your tea slowly, the warm liquid carrying hints of mountain flowers and distant rain. Through the translucent screen that separates your alcove from the main room, you can see the careful choreography of compliance that governs every interaction. A minor official enters, his robes bearing the precise shade of blue that indicates his rank. Neither too bright nor too pale, walking the narrow path between presumption and neglect. His every step speaks of someone who has learned to read the language of color as fluently as written characters. The serving girl who refills your cup moves with the practiced grace of someone who has memorized every rule. Her simple hemp robe is dyed the color of earth after rain, humble yet clean, speaking of honest labor without reaching beyond her station. Even her hair ornaments, simple wooden pins carved with modest flowers, follow the unspoken codes that govern what materials and motifs are appropriate for each level of society. From somewhere in the back rooms comes the soft sound of someone grinding ink, the rhythmic scraping a meditation on patience and precision. The tea-house owner, you realize, is likely preparing official documents, perhaps permits for traders or notices of compliance for the local magistrate. Even the act of writing requires careful attention to color, for the wrong shade of ink or the wrong quality of paper could suggest aspirations above one's station. An elderly scholar at a corner table catches your attention as he carefully unfolds a scroll, his movements deliberate and reverent. The paper itself is cream-colored, expensive but not ostentatious, and the characters painted upon it flow in black ink of perfect consistency. He reads silently, his lips moving slightly with the ancient words, and you wonder if he's reviewing poetry or perhaps legal texts that define the boundaries of acceptable expression. The afternoon light shifts as clouds pass overhead, and the quality of illumination in the tea-house changes with it. What seemed like acceptable brown in the morning light now appears dangerously close to forbidden hues, and you watch as several patrons subtly adjust their positions to avoid having their clothing examined too closely. This constant vigilance has become second nature, a survival skill as essential as reading or arithmetic. Through the paper screens, you can hear the sounds of the street beyond, the creak of cart wheels, the calls of vendors, the soft conversations of passers-by. But even these everyday sounds carry the weight of regulation. For what goods can be sold, in what colors they can be displayed, and who can purchase them are all governed by the same invisible laws that determine the shade of your morning robe. A young apprentice hurries past the tea-house window, his arms full of cloth bundles wrapped in neutral linen. You catch a glimpse of brilliant red fabric peeking from one bundle, quickly covered as the boy notices your gaze. Vermilion for the temples, perhaps, or crimson for a wedding celebration. Colors that require special permits and careful documentation to possess, let alone display. The tea master approaches your table with a fresh pot, his movements flowing like water over stones. His robe is the color of aged bamboo, weathered and dignified without reaching for grandeur. As he pours the steaming liquid, you notice the way his sleeves are cut, wide enough to show prosperity, narrow enough to avoid presumption. Even the gesture of service carries meaning in this world where every detail speaks of hierarchy and respect. Outside, the rhythmic sound of a weaver's loom drifts through the afternoon air, the steady beat speaking of threads being joined according to patterns set down by generations of tradition. The weaver works with colors approved by the local magistrate, creating cloth that will clothe the bodies of citizens while reinforcing the social order that governs their lives. Each thread that passes through the loom is a small act of compliance, a contribution to the great tapestry of imperial control. A group of traveling merchants pauses outside the tea house, their conversation barely audible through the screens. They speak of border checkpoints where officials examine not just goods but the very clothes on their backs, ensuring that nothing forbidden passes into the empire's heart. Tales of confiscated silks and hefty fines serve as warnings to those who might test the boundaries of acceptable color. The light continues to shift as afternoon edges toward evening, and the tea house begins to fill with the gentle sounds of preparation for the evening meal. Clay bowls clink softly against wooden tables, and the aroma of steaming rice mingles with the ever-present scent of tea and incense. The servers move with practiced efficiency, their earth-toned robes blending into the warm shadows of the establishment. You notice how the colors around you seem to pulse with the rhythm of daily life. The amber glow of lanterns, the cream of paper screens, the deep brown of wooden beams. These are the safe colors, the hues that nurture and sustain without challenging or threatening. They create a world of muted beauty, where harmony is achieved through careful limitation rather than bold expression. An official document is being read aloud at a nearby table, the words flowing like music in the gathering dusk. The reader's voice carries the cadence of law, listing the specific shades that are permitted for different occasions, the exact materials that may be used for various garments, the precise circumstances under which exceptions might be granted. Even the sound of regulation becomes a kind of poetry in this peaceful space. As the evening deepens and the lanterns grow brighter, you begin to understand that these laws are not merely restrictions but a form of protection. They create a world where everyone knows their place, where the weight of decision is lifted from individual shoulders and placed upon the broader structure of society. There is peace in this certainty, comfort in the knowledge that one's choices are guided by wisdom accumulated over centuries. The tea house owner lights additional lanterns as full darkness approaches, each flame carefully tended to ensure the right quality of illumination. The warm light transforms the space into something almost magical, a sanctuary where the harsh edges of regulation soften into the gentle guidance of tradition. Here, in this quiet corner of the empire, the laws of color become not commands but whispers, not chains but gentle threads that bind the community together in shared understanding. As the tea house settles into evening quiet, and the last whispers of forbidden colors fade into comfortable shadow, we turn our attention to the ancient wisdom that gives these laws their meaning. The cosmic philosophy that sees in every hue a reflection of the eternal dance between heaven and earth. You rest under a willow tree, the breeze carrying the scent of blossoms, as the afternoon sun filters through the delicate leaves above you. The gentle rustle of branches creates a natural symphony, and somewhere in the distance, the soft tinkle of wind chimes dances on the air. Your back rests against the smooth bark of the ancient tree, its trunk worn smooth by countless seasons, and you feel the earth beneath you, solid and eternal. The garden around you seems to breathe with the rhythm of ages, each element carefully placed to reflect the great cosmic dance that governs all existence. Here, in this tranquil space, the philosophy of the five elements reveals itself not through scholarly discourse, but through the simple beauty of colors living in harmony with the natural world. To your left, a small grove of bamboos sways in the breeze, their green stalks reaching toward the sky like nature's own meditation on the element of wood. The color green speaks of spring's awakening, of life force pushing through earth toward light, of the endless cycle of growth and renewal that governs all living things. The bamboo's jade green hue carries within it the essence of the East, where each day begins with the sun's first gentle touch upon the world. Wood feeds fire, the sages teach, and as your eyes drift across the garden, you see this truth made manifest in the crimson blooms of peonies that cluster near a small stone altar. Their red petals unfurl like flames frozen in silk, each bloom a testament to the element of fire that rules the south and governs the heat of summer. The red speaks of passion controlled, of energy channeled toward creation rather than destruction. In the empire's great halls, this same red adorns the pillars of temples and the gates of palaces, but here it appears in nature's own gentle expression. The fire element creates earth, and beneath your resting place, the rich brown soil tells its own story of transformation. Yellow flowers, pale as morning sunshine, dot the garden beds, their color echoing the yellow of the emperor's robes but in a humbler, more accessible form. These are the colors of late summer, when the earth reaches its fullest expression, when the harvest promises abundance and the center holds steady against the turning of seasons. The yellow earth beneath you feels warm, solid, reliable, the foundation upon which all other elements dance their eternal patterns. A gentle breeze stirs the leaves above, carrying with it the subtle chime of metal wind ornaments hanging from the willow's branches. Their white and silver surfaces catch the light, creating tiny stars that flicker and dance with each movement of air. These represent the element of metal, the power of autumn that brings clarity and precision to the world. The white speaks of purity and completion, the silver of reflection and inner wisdom. In the empire's great bureaucracy, these colors mark the robes of scholars and judges, those who must see clearly through the complications of human nature to find truth. The metal element gathers water, and a small stream winds its way through the garden, its dark surface reflecting the sky like a mirror made of liquid night. The water's color shifts between deep blue and black, carrying within it the mystery of winter and the north. This is the element of rest and contemplation, of depths that hold wisdom accumulated over countless years. The stream murmurs softly as it flows over smooth stones, its voice a constant reminder that even the gentlest persistence can reshape the hardest obstacles. As you sit beneath the willow, watching the interplay of colors around you, the deeper meaning of this ancient philosophy begins to unfold like a scroll written in light and shadow. Each element feeds the next in an endless cycle of creation and transformation. Wood feeds fire with its substance, fire creates earth through its ashes, earth bears metal in its depths, metal gathers water from the air it cools, and water nourishes wood with its life-giving essence. The colors tell this story without words, each hue a chapter in the great book of existence. A butterfly lands on your sleeve, its wings painted in delicate patterns that seem to capture all five elements in miniature. The green of new leaves, the red of passion, the yellow of earth, the white of clarity, and the blue-black of mystery, all dancing together in perfect harmony on wings no larger than a child's palm. You watch as it rests for a moment, its presence a reminder that the cosmic order reveals itself in the smallest details of daily life. The afternoon light shifts, and the colors around you seem to pulse with deeper meaning. The green bamboo speaks not just of growth but of flexibility, the wisdom of bending without breaking. The red peonies whisper of love that burns without consuming, passion that creates rather than destroys. The yellow earth beneath you hums with the quiet strength of mothers and farmers, the steady power that feeds nations. The white and silver ornaments chime with the clarity of autumn stars, while the dark water murmurs of depths that hold all knowledge. In the distance, you can hear the soft voices of children playing, their laughter carrying on the same breeze that stirs the five-colored prayer flags hanging from a nearby pagoda. Each flag represents one of the elements, and as they flutter in the wind, they seem to be whispering prayers to the universe, asking for balance and harmony in all things. The children's game involves tossing colored stones into circles drawn in the dirt, unconsciously practicing the same cosmic principles that govern empires and seasons. A gardener moves quietly through the space, tending to the plants with the careful attention of someone who understands that every color has its season, every element its proper time and place. His simple robes are dyed the color of earth after rain, marking him as one who works in harmony with natural cycles rather than attempting to dominate them. He waters the yellow flowers with care, knowing that earth needs water's nourishment just as metal needs earth's stability. The sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, and the quality of light in the garden changes subtly. The green bamboo takes on deeper, richer tones, while the red peonies seem to glow with inner fire. The yellow earth becomes golden, and the white ornaments catch the light like captured starlight. The dark water reflects the changing sky, becoming a mirror that holds both earth and heaven in its depths. You close your eyes and feel the five elements moving through your own body. The wood of your bones reaching toward growth, the fire of your heart beating steadily, the earth of your flesh providing foundation, the metal of your breath bringing clarity, the water of your blood carrying life to every corner of your being. The colors that surround you are not mere decoration, but expressions of the forces that animate all existence. A monk passes by on a distant path, his robes the color of autumn leaves, brown touched with gold. He walks slowly, meditatively, his every step a practice of mindfulness that honors the earth element beneath his feet. His presence adds another layer to the garden's teaching, reminding you that human beings are also part of this great cosmic dance, their clothing and actions contributing to the harmony or discord of the whole. The willow tree above you stirs more actively as the afternoon breeze strengthens, its pale green leaves creating a shifting canopy of light and shadow. The tree itself embodies the wood element's wisdom, deeply rooted yet flexible, strong yet yielding, growing ever upward while remaining grounded in earth. Its presence creates a natural temple where the five elements can be contemplated in peace and silence. As the light continues to change, you begin to understand why the empire's laws governing color are not merely arbitrary rules, but expressions of this deeper cosmic order. When the emperor wears yellow, he aligns himself with the earth element's stability and centrality. When temples are painted red, they honor the fire element's transformative power. When scholars wear white, they seek the metal element's clarity and precision. When common people dress in blue, they acknowledge the water element's essential, life-giving nature. When nature itself displays green, it celebrates the wood element's endless creativity and growth. The garden around you becomes a living mandala, each color positioned not by chance, but by understanding of how elements support and balance each other. The red flowers grow near the yellow earth, fire feeding on earth's stability. The green bamboo stands beside the flowing stream, wood drawing nourishment from water's depths. The white ornaments hang from living branches, metal finding its place within wood's reaching embrace. A pair of cranes wade through the shallow edges of the stream, their white feathers touched with black markings that speak of metal and water in perfect balance. They move with the slow grace of creatures who understand that hurry disrupts harmony, that true power lies in alignment with natural rhythms rather than in opposition to them. Their presence adds another note to the garden's symphony, another voice in the eternal conversation between earth and heaven. As the willow's shadow lengthens and the five elements settle into evening's gentle embrace, we follow the path of a humble merchant who must navigate this world of cosmic color with nothing but wit and wisdom to guide him through the intricate dance of commerce and compliance. You load your cart at dawn, the scent of fresh silk wafting through the air as morning mist clings to the cobblestones of the marketplace. The wooden wheels of your cart creak softly as you arrange your precious cargo, each bolt of fabric wrapped in protective linen that bears the neutral tone of safety. Around you, the world awakens slowly, the gentle clatter of other merchants preparing their wares, the soft murmur of early rising customers, and the distant sound of temple bells marking the start of another day in the empire's bustling heart. Your fingers trace the edges of each bundle with the practiced care of someone who has learned that survival depends on attention to detail. Every thread tells a story, every color carries risk, and every transaction requires the delicate balance of profit and compliance. The silk beneath your hands feels cool and smooth, its surface holding the faint fragrance of the mulberry leaves that fed the silkworms, the patient labor of countless hands that transformed cocoons into the empire's most precious commodity. The morning air carries the scent of incense from nearby temples, mingling with the earthier aromas of dye workshops and the sweet fragrance of jasmine growing along the marketplace walls. You breathe deeply, centering yourself for the day ahead, knowing that each interaction will test your knowledge of the invisible boundaries that separate the acceptable from the forbidden. Your own robes, carefully chosen for this day's journey, are the color of autumn leaves, brown touched with gold, humble enough to avoid suspicion yet prosperous enough to suggest successful business. The fabric speaks of moderate success without reaching for grandeur, of honest trade conducted within the bounds of imperial law. Even your belt, woven from hemp and dyed with common madder root, tells the story of someone who knows his place in the great hierarchy of color. As you begin to move through the marketplace, other merchants nod in greeting, their own clothing chosen with the same careful attention to the unspoken rules that govern your world. Old Master Chun, who deals in common cotton for the working classes, wears robes the color of river stones, gray-brown and reliable. His cart is loaded with bolts of practical fabric in shades that won't draw unwanted attention. The blues and grays that clothe the empire's laborers, the earth tones that speak of honest work and simple living. Beside him, Merchant Lu arranges her display of hemp and linen, the natural fibers already dyed in the muted palette that marks the boundaries of acceptable commerce. Her movements are precise and economical, each gesture speaking of years spent navigating the treacherous waters of regulated trade. She catches your eye and smiles, the expression of someone who shares your understanding of the delicate dance between prosperity and prudence. The sun climbs higher, casting long shadows between the market stalls, and you notice how the changing light affects the perception of color. What appeared as safe brown in the early morning now shows hints of red that make you adjust your cart's position, ensuring that no bolt of fabric catches the light in a way that might suggest forbidden hues. This constant vigilance has become second nature, a survival skill as essential as the ability to judge quality or calculate profit. Your first customer of the day approaches. A tailor whose shop serves the merchant class, his needs carefully circumscribed by the regulations that govern his clientele. His practiced eye examines your wares with the expertise of someone who has learned to see not just beauty but compliance in every thread. He lifts a bolt of blue silk, letting the light play across its surface, checking for any hint of the deeper blues that might cross into forbidden territory. "This shade," he murmurs, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone conducting business in a world where words carry weight. It speaks of clear skies and flowing water. Suitable for a scholar's wife, perhaps, or a minor official's daughter. His fingers test the fabric's weight and texture, but his eyes remain focused on the color, reading its story like a scholar reads ancient texts. The negotiation that follows is a subtle dance of understanding and compliance. You speak of the silk's origins, worms fed on leaves from approved mulberry groves, thread spun in workshops licensed by the imperial bureaucracy, dye created from indigo plants grown in designated fields. Each detail is a small proof of legitimacy, a thread in the web of documentation that protects both seller and buyer from the consequences of transgression. As the morning progresses, you encounter the full spectrum of your trade's complexity. A young woman seeks fabric for her wedding dress, her mother beside her offering gentle guidance about what colors will bring honor to their family without overstepping the boundaries of their station. They examine cream-colored silk with the reverence of those who understand that marriage itself is a negotiation with tradition, a careful balancing of dreams and propriety. The cream silk you show them is the color of pearls and morning clouds, pure without being presumptuous, beautiful without being challenging. It speaks of new beginnings and quiet joy, of celebrations that honor tradition while embracing hope. The young woman's eyes shine as she touches the fabric, feeling in its smooth surface the promise of a life lived in harmony with the greater order. An elderly gentleman approaches your cart with the measured steps of someone who has learned patience through long years of careful living. His robes are the deep brown of well-aged wood, marking him as a man of some prosperity who has chosen the path of discretion over display. He seeks fabric for winter robes, something that will provide warmth without attracting unwanted attention from officials who might question the source of such prosperity. You show him wool dyed with walnut hulls, the color rich and deep without crossing into the forbidden territory of true luxury. The fabric speaks of comfort and security, of winters passed in contemplation rather than ostentation. His fingers test the weave with the expertise of someone who has learned to judge quality by touch, his approval evident in the slight nod that indicates successful negotiation. The day's heat begins to build, and you notice how the marketplace adapts to the changing conditions. Awnings unfurl to provide shade, their colors carefully chosen to complement rather than compete with the goods displayed beneath them. The neutral tones of hemp and linen create a backdrop that allows the approved colors of merchandise to shine without overwhelming the eye or challenging the established order. A group of traveling performers pauses near your cart, their leader examining fabrics with the careful attention of someone who understands that their very livelihood depends on walking the narrow line between entertainment and transgression. Their current costumes are safely within the bounds of acceptability, earth tones and muted colors that speak of humble origins and artistic dedication without reaching for the grandeur that might attract official scrutiny. The performer's leader, a woman whose grace speaks of years spent learning to move within carefully defined boundaries, lifts a bolt of green silk with the delicate touch of someone who recognizes both beauty and danger. "This shade," she says, her voice carrying the measured cadence of someone who has learned to speak carefully, "it reminds me of spring bamboo, of growth that knows its proper season." You nod, understanding the coded language that governs such transactions. The green she admires is indeed the color of new bamboo, safely within the realm of natural beauty without crossing into the sacred territory of imperial jade. It speaks of performances that celebrate the turning of seasons, of stories that honor tradition while providing gentle entertainment for audiences who seek beauty within the bounds of propriety. As afternoon shadows begin to lengthen, you encounter a challenge that tests all your accumulated wisdom. A young official approaches, his robes marking him as someone with the authority to question and the power to confiscate. His examination of your wares is thorough but not hostile, the careful scrutiny of someone who understands that merchants and officials exist in a delicate balance of mutual dependence. He lifts a bolt of yellow silk, holding it to the light with the practiced eye of someone trained to detect the subtle differences between permitted and forbidden hues. The fabric in his hands is the pale yellow of summer wheat, clearly distinguished from the imperial gold that marks the emperor's sacred garments. Yet even this distinction requires careful explanation, a gentle recitation of the silk's origins and intended use. "For a scholar's ceremonial robes," you explain, your voice carrying the calm assurance of someone who has learned to navigate these interactions with patience and precision. The color speaks of autumn harvest, of wisdom gained through careful study and humble service. The official nods, his approval evident in the careful way he refolds the fabric before moving on to examine other wares. The day's final customer arrives as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, painting the marketplace in shades of amber and gold. She is an elderly woman whose bearing speaks of someone who has lived through many changes, who has seen dynasties rise and fall, while the eternal dance of commerce continues. Her needs are simple: fabric for mourning robes, colors that will honor the deceased while providing comfort to the living. As the marketplace settles into evening quiet, and you secure your remaining wares for the night's rest, we turn our attention to the sacred spaces where color takes on its deepest meaning. The temples where earthly hues meet heavenly purpose in perfect harmony. You step into a temple, the glow of lanterns casting warm shadows on the walls as the heavy wooden doors close softly behind you. The transition from the bustling marketplace to this sacred space feels like entering another world entirely, one where colors speak not of commerce or status, but of the eternal dialogue between earth and heaven. The air carries the rich fragrance of sandalwood incense, mingling with the subtle scent of aged wood and the faint sweetness of lotus blossoms floating in ceramic bowls. Your footsteps echo softly on the polished stone floor, each sound seeming to dissolve into the temple's embracing silence. The space stretches before you like a living meditation on the power of color to transform the human spirit, every hue carefully chosen to guide the soul toward contemplation and peace. Here, the strict regulations that govern secular life give way to a different kind of order, one that speaks of sacred purpose and divine intention. The first thing that captures your attention is the magnificent altar at the temple's heart, where golden statues of the Buddha sit in perfect stillness, their surfaces gleaming with the warm light of countless oil lamps. The gold speaks not of earthly wealth but of enlightenment itself, the precious metal transformed into something that transcends mere material value. Each statue seems to radiate an inner light, as if the color itself has been infused with centuries of prayer and devotion. Red pillars rise toward the ceiling like giant trees of cinnabar, their surfaces carved with intricate patterns that seem to dance in the flickering lamplight. This is vermilion's sacred purpose, not to display imperial power, but to channel the life force that flows through all existence. The red speaks of the fire element in its purest form, passion transformed into compassion, desire refined into wisdom. Each pillar stands as a testament to the temple's role as a bridge between the mundane world and the realm of the sacred. The ceiling above stretches like a canopy of deep blue, painted with golden stars that seem to twinkle in the warm light. This celestial dome creates the illusion of standing beneath the night sky, surrounded by the infinite mystery of existence. The blue speaks of the water element's depths, the profound stillness that underlies all movement, the peace that surpasses understanding. Gazing upward, you feel a sense of floating in space, held by forces greater than the pull of earth. Soft chanting drifts from a side chapel, where monks in saffron robes move through their evening prayers with the fluid grace of those who have learned to embody the rhythm of eternity. Their robes are the color of autumn leaves and setting sun, speaking of the Buddhist tradition's emphasis on impermanence and the beauty found in letting go. The orange-yellow fabric rustles softly as they move, creating a visual harmony with the golden statues and the warm glow of the lamps. Along the walls, murals tell the stories of the Buddha's life and teachings, each scene painted in colors that seem to glow with inner light. The artists who created these works understood that color itself could be a form of scripture, each hue carrying meaning that transcends the need for words. Deep blues speak of meditation's profound stillness, while bright greens celebrate the awakening of compassion. Rich purples mark moments of spiritual transformation, and pure whites indicate the clarity that comes with enlightenment. A young novice approaches, carrying a tray of butter lamps whose flames create tiny stars of light in the temple's gentle darkness. His simple robes are the color of earth after rain, marking him as one who has chosen the path of service over the pursuit of worldly advancement. He moves with the careful attention of someone who understands that every action in this sacred space is a form of prayer, every gesture an offering to the infinite. The lamp flames dance slightly as he places each one before different statues, the light playing across the golden surfaces and creating patterns that seem to shift and change like living things. The butter itself gives off a rich, clean scent that mingles with the incense, creating an atmosphere that feels both ancient and eternally present. Each flame represents a prayer, a wish, a moment of connection between the individual soul and the vast mystery of existence. In a quiet alcove, you discover a small shrine dedicated to Guanyin, the goddess of mercy, her statue carved from white jade that seems to glow with inner light. The pale green of the jade speaks of healing and renewal, while the statue's serene expression offers comfort to all who seek refuge from the world's troubles. Offerings of white flowers rest at her feet, their petals already beginning to turn brown at the edges, a gentle reminder of the impermanence that governs all earthly beauty. The temple's design creates a natural flow that guides visitors through different states of contemplation. Near the entrance, bright colors invite the eye and capture attention, drawing worshippers away from worldly concerns. As you move deeper into the space, the hues become more subdued, more contemplative, encouraging the mind to settle into peaceful reflection. At the temple's heart, the colors achieve perfect balance, creating an environment where the soul can rest in the presence of the divine. A group of elderly women sits in silent meditation before the main altar, their gray robes blending into the temple's shadows like stones worn smooth by centuries of reverence. They have chosen colors that speak of wisdom earned through long years of practice, hues that reflect the understanding that true beauty lies not in display, but in the quiet cultivation of inner peace. Their presence adds another layer to the temple's teaching, showing how human beings can become living expressions of the sacred principles embodied in the building's design. The afternoon light filtering through the temple's windows creates constantly shifting patterns on the painted walls, transforming the static images into something that seems to breathe and move. A mural depicting the Buddha's enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree glows with renewed life as sunlight touches the golden highlights, while shadows deepen the blues and purples that represent the spiritual darkness he overcame. The interplay of natural and artificial light creates a visual symphony that changes throughout the day, offering new revelations to those who take time to observe. In the temple's library, you glimpse monks copying sacred texts, their brushes moving with the meditative precision of those who understand that writing itself is a form of spiritual practice. The ink they use is the deep black of night sky, while the paper glows with the soft cream of moonlight. Each character they create is a small act of devotion, a contribution to the preservation of wisdom that will guide future generations toward understanding. The temple's garden, visible through open doorways, extends the sacred color palette into the natural world. Lotus flowers float in still pools, their white and pink petals reflecting the Buddhist teaching that beauty can emerge from muddy waters. Carefully tended trees create shades of green that speak of growth and renewal, while carefully placed stones in shades of gray and brown provide points of stillness and contemplation. As evening approaches, the temple's colors seem to deepen and intensify, as if the approaching darkness allows their inner light to shine more brightly. The golden statues glow with warm radiance, the red pillars pulse with life force, and the blue ceiling seems to hold the first stars of night. This is the temple's most magical hour, when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds becomes most permeable. A bell rings softly in the distance, its clear tone seeming to carry the essence of all the colors surrounding you. The gold of enlightenment, the red of compassion, the blue of wisdom, the green of growth, and the white of purity. The sound reverberates through the temple space, creating invisible harmonies that complement the visual symphony of carefully chosen hues. The temple cats, revered as guardians of the sacred space, move through the shadows with the fluid grace of creatures who exist comfortably in both worlds. Their fur ranges from deep black to pure white, with every shade of gray and brown in between, creating a living demonstration of the temple's teaching that all colors, all beings, all experiences are part of the same divine tapestry. As the temple settles into evening quiet and the last incense smoke curls toward the star-painted ceiling, we turn our attention to the artists and craftsmen who created these sacred spaces. The painters whose brushes captured not just color, but the very essence of spiritual truth. You watch a painter mix colors, the soft scrape of a brush on silk filling the room as afternoon sunlight filters through paper screens, casting gentle patterns across the weathered wooden floor. The studio rests in a quiet corner of the artisan quarter, its walls lined with shelves holding countless jars of pigments, brushes of every size, and scrolls in various stages of completion. The air carries the earthy scent of ground minerals, the sweet fragrance of flower petals dried for dye, and the subtle metallic tang of gold leaf waiting to be applied. Master Wei sits hunched over his work table, his thin fingers moving with the precision of someone who has spent decades learning to coax magic from mundane materials. His hair, white as fresh snow, is pulled back in a simple knot, and his robes are the color of autumn bark, chosen for their ability to hide the inevitable stains that come with his craft. Despite his advanced age, his hands remain steady, each movement deliberate and controlled as he guides his brush across the silk surface. The painting taking shape beneath his brush depicts a mountain landscape shrouded in mist, each peak rendered in subtle gradations of gray and blue that seem to capture the very essence of distance and mystery. But it is not the subject matter that captures your attention. It is the extraordinary care with which each color is prepared, mixed, and applied. This is not mere decoration but a form of alchemy, transforming raw earth and plant matter into something that speaks directly to the soul. On the table beside him, Dozens of small ceramic dishes hold pigments in various stages of preparation. Some contain powders so fine they seem to glow with inner light. Ground lapis lazuli from distant mountains, creating blues deeper than the night sky. Others hold earthy ochres and umbers, their warm tones speaking of fields and forests, of the patient accumulation of seasons. Each pigment tells a story of its origin, carrying within its particles the essence of the place from which it came. The process of creating these colors is itself a meditation, requiring patience and reverence that transforms the painter into something between artist and priest. You watch as Master Wei carefully measures a tiny amount of cinnabar, its red surface gleaming like drops of dragon's blood. He adds it to a small amount of binding agent made from tree sap, working the mixture with a small jade pestle until it achieves the perfect consistency. The resulting vermilion glows with an inner fire, ready to breathe life into the painted robes of celestial beings. A young apprentice moves quietly through the studio, grinding pigments with the methodical rhythm of someone who understands that mastery begins with perfect attention to fundamentals. His mortar and pestle work steadily, reducing chunks of malachite to powder so fine it floats like green dust in the afternoon light. The green that emerges from this patient labor will become the leaves of painted trees, the robes of wise sages, the depths of painted waters where dragons sleep. The walls of the studio are covered with reference materials, pressed flowers that preserve the exact shades of nature's palette, fragments of precious stones that demonstrate the potential locked within raw minerals, and strips of silk showing how different colors interact when placed side by side. These are the painter's library, his encyclopedia of possibility, accumulated over years of careful observation and experimentation. Master Wei pauses in his work to examine a small vial of gold powder, its contents gleaming like captured sunlight. This is perhaps the most precious of all pigments, created by grinding actual gold into particles so fine they can be mixed with binding agents and applied with a brush. The cost of such material means it is used sparingly, reserved for the most sacred subjects, the halos of enlightened beings, the throne rooms of celestial emperors, the sacred texts that will guide generations toward wisdom. The technique of applying gold requires extraordinary skill, for the metal behaves differently than plant or mineral pigments. Too much pressure, and the gold clumps together, losing its luminous quality. Too little, and it fails to adhere properly to the silk. Master Wei demonstrates the proper method, his brush barely touching the surface as he applies tiny dots of gold to represent stars in a painted night sky. Each dot catches the light differently, creating a constellation that seems to twinkle with its own inner fire. An older apprentice works at another table, mixing the blues that will become the robes of a painted bodhisattva. The base color comes from indigo, that most common of blue dyes, but he enriches it with tiny amounts of more precious pigments. A whisper of ultramarine from lapis lazuli, a touch of azurite for depth, a hint of cobalt for brilliance. The resulting blue carries within it the essence of sky and water, of meditation and infinite compassion. The secrets of color mixing are passed down through generations like sacred knowledge, each master adding his own discoveries to the accumulated wisdom of centuries. The proportions must be exact, the grinding technique precise, the timing of application perfect. A color mixed on a humid day will behave differently than one prepared when the air is dry. The temperature of the studio, the quality of the light, even the painter's own emotional state, all these factors influence the final result. You notice how the painter's movements follow natural rhythms, their breathing synchronized with the motion of their brushes. This is not mere technical skill, but a form of moving meditation, where the artist becomes a channel for forces greater than individual will. The colors that emerge from this process carry something of the painter's spirit, their vibrancy a reflection of the inner state that created them. A collection of finished works hangs along one wall, each piece a masterpiece of color harmony. A painting of cranes in flight uses whites so pure they seem to glow against the misty background, while another depicts flowering plum branches in delicate pinks and corals that capture the essence of spring's first awakening. The colors in these works seem to pulse with life, as if the patient care invested in their creation has imbued them with a form of visual breath. The studio's most carefully guarded secrets lie in the recipes for special effects. The technique for creating colors that seem to change in different lights, the method for achieving transparency in opaque pigments, the secret of making metallic colors that maintain their brilliance over centuries. These formulas are written in coded language, disguised as poems or philosophical texts, protecting them from those who might misuse such knowledge. Master Wei's current work requires a particularly challenging technique, the creation of purple that will serve as the robe of a painted sage. Purple is perhaps the most difficult color to achieve, requiring the careful blending of red and blue pigments that often refuse to harmonize properly. He begins with a base of red ochre, slowly adding tiny amounts of lapis lazuli powder while stirring constantly with a brush made from the finest sable hair. The mixture must be perfect. Too much blue, and the purple becomes cold and lifeless. Too little, and it remains merely a muddy red. The afternoon light shifts as clouds pass overhead, and you watch how this changes the appearance of every color in the studio. The painters have learned to work with these natural variations, understanding that a painting must look beautiful in all lights. The warm glow of oil lamps, the cool illumination of dawn, the golden radiance of sunset. This requires an intuitive understanding of how colors interact not just with each other, but with the constantly changing environment around them. A tea ceremony takes place in one corner of the studio, the painters pausing in their work to participate in a ritual that helps maintain the clarity of mind necessary for their art. The tea itself is the color of liquid jade, its gentle warmth helping to steady hands and calm spirits. This break in the work is not an interruption, but an essential part of the creative process, allowing the artists to return to their colors with renewed sensitivity and focus. The day's work continues with the preparation of a particularly precious pigment, genuine purple derived from certain sea creatures whose shells must be processed in a specific way to yield their rare dye. The resulting color is so costly that it is used only for the most sacred subjects, and the technique for creating it is known by only a handful of master painters throughout the empire. Master Wei handles this pigment with the reverence due to something that costs more than gold, mixing it with infinite care to create a purple that seems to hold the depths of twilight sky. As the afternoon shadows lengthen and the painters carefully clean their brushes, storing their precious pigments for another day's work, we turn our attention to the festivals where these carefully guarded colors burst forth in celebration, transforming the night into a canvas of living light. Summary: experience the gentle glow of lantern festivals, where colors dance in the night air and communities gather in quiet celebration, illuminating the careful balance between joy and imperial color restrictions. Peaceful opening. You stroll through a night market, lanterns glowing softly above the crowd, their warm light casting dancing shadows on the cobblestones beneath your feet. The evening air carries the gentle warmth of late summer as you make your way through the winding streets of Chang'an. The sun has long since disappeared behind the curved rooftops, leaving the sky painted in deep purples and midnight blues. Tonight is the Mid-Autumn Festival, and the entire city seems to breathe with a different rhythm, slower, more contemplative, as if the very stones beneath your feet understand the sacred nature of this celebration. You pause at the edge of the market square, where hundreds of paper lanterns sway gently in the evening breeze. The sight takes your breath away, not with sudden shock, but with the slow, creeping wonder of witnessing something truly beautiful. Red lanterns, deep as pomegranate seeds, hang in careful clusters. Their warm glow mingles with the softer light of cream-colored paper spheres, creating pools of amber radiance that seem to float in the darkness like fallen stars. The scent of osmanthus blossoms drifts through the air, sweet and delicate, mingling with the earthier aromas of roasted chestnuts and steamed dumplings. A vendor nearby tends to his cart, the soft sizzle of oil and the gentle clatter of wooden utensils creating a rhythmic backdrop to the evening's festivities. Children's laughter echoes softly from somewhere within the crowd, but it's muted, peaceful. The kind of joy that settles into your bones rather than startling your senses. As you move deeper into the market, you notice the careful choreography of color that governs even this celebration. The lanterns, while beautiful, follow ancient rules as old as the dynasty itself. Red dominates, of course, the color of good fortune and joy, permitted to all during festivals. These crimson orbs glow like gentle fires, their light warm against your skin as you pass beneath them. But you notice, too, the subtle ways in which the forbidden colors are absent from the common displays. No yellow lanterns shine here among the merchants' stalls, for that sacred hue remains reserved for the emperor alone. Even in celebration, even in the darkness where such restrictions might go unnoticed, the people of Chang'an honor the ancient laws. The absence of imperial yellow creates its own kind of poetry, a silent acknowledgement of the power that governs even their moments of joy. You pause beside a lantern maker's stall, watching as an elderly craftsman carefully applies paste to a delicate paper frame. His movements are slow and precise, each stroke of his brush deliberate and measured. The lantern he's creating glows with a soft pink hue, like the first blush of dawn on cherry blossoms. The color comes from safflower petals, he explains to a curious customer, his voice barely above a whisper. It's a gentle shade, one that brings no challenge to imperial authority, yet carries its own quiet beauty. The festival unfolds around you like a slow-blooming flower. Families gather in small circles, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of handheld lanterns. An old woman sits on a wooden stool, her weathered hands holding a small white lantern painted with delicate blue butterflies. The indigo used for these creatures is permissible, common enough that even the poorest families can afford to add such touches to their celebrations. She rocks slightly as she watches the festivities, her eyes reflecting the dancing lights like small mirrors. A group of young scholars has gathered near a tea stall, their voices soft as they recite poetry beneath the lantern glow. One speaks of moonlight on water, comparing its silver radiance to the gentle light of the paper lanterns swaying overhead. Another describes the red glow as drops of liquid fire, blessing the earth with warmth. Their words drift through the air like incense, adding another layer to the evening's peaceful atmosphere. You notice a temple nearby, its entrance marked by larger lanterns that cast deeper shadows. These are more elaborate, their red silk stretched over bamboo frames that have been shaped into lotus blossoms and dragons. The vermilion used here is richer, more saturated than the common red of the market lanterns. This deeper hue speaks of the temple's special status, its connection to the divine realms that govern mortal life. Even so, it remains within the bounds of what is permitted. Red for celebration, for spiritual practice, for the kind of joy that connects earth to heaven. A soft breeze stirs the lanterns, creating a gentle symphony of rustling paper and creaking bamboo. The sound is hypnotic, like distant wind chimes or the whisper of leaves in an ancient forest. You find yourself moving in rhythm with this quiet music, your steps unconsciously matching the gentle sway of the lights above. Near the center of the square, a storyteller has gathered a small audience. She sits cross-legged on a woven mat, her voice carrying easily through the warm air as she speaks of ancient festivals, of celebrations that stretch back through countless generations. Her words paint pictures of emperors and poets, of moonlit gardens and midnight revelries, all connected by the simple act of lighting a lantern and releasing it into the darkness. The children in her audience hold small lanterns of their own, simple paper cylinders painted with flowers and birds in soft, muted colors. Green leaves curl around pink blossoms, blue birds perch on brown branches. These are the colors of nature, of everyday life, permitted to all and carrying their own quiet dignity. A little girl holds her lantern close to her face, and in its glow, her eyes shine with wonder at the stories unfolding around her. As the evening deepens, you notice the way the lantern light transforms the familiar streets into something magical. Shadows dance on ancient walls, creating patterns that seem to tell their own stories. The gentle illumination softens harsh edges, making the city feel like a place suspended between the waking world and dreams. Even the colors seem different in this light. The browns of wooden buildings become warm amber, the gray stones glow like pearls, and the dark night sky seems to pulse with deep purple radiance. A musician sits in an alcove, her fingers dancing across the strings of a guqin. The melody she creates is like water flowing over smooth stones, each note clear and pure, rising and falling with the rhythm of the evening breeze. The music mingles with the other sounds of the festival, the soft conversations, the distant laughter, the gentle rustle of paper lanterns, creating a symphony that seems to embrace the entire city. You purchase a small lantern from a vendor, its paper dyed the soft orange of marigold petals. The merchant's hands are stained with natural dyes, evidence of his craft, and he smiles as he explains how the color comes from turmeric and other roots, ground and boiled until they yield their golden essence. It's a warm shade, reminiscent of harvest moons and autumn leaves, carrying within it the promise of abundance and contentment. Holding your lantern, you join the gentle flow of celebrants making their way toward the city's edge, where tradition calls for the release of lanterns into the night sky. The procession moves slowly, like a river of light flowing through the darkened streets. Above, the real moon watches from its perch among the stars, its silver radiance mingling with the warm glow of hundreds of paper lanterns. The festival represents something profound about the relationship between beauty and law, between personal expression and social order. Even in celebration, even in moments of pure joy, the careful restrictions on color remain in place. Yet rather than diminishing the beauty of the occasion, these limitations seem to enhance it, creating a harmony born of shared understanding and mutual respect. As the festival fades, we drift to explore the consequences of color. Summary: discover the quiet tales of those who dared to wear forbidden hues, exploring the gentle consequences and human stories behind acts of subtle rebellion in a world where color carried the weight of law. Peaceful opening. You overhear a hushed story in a village, the air cool with the touch of dusk, as an elderly woman shares whispered tales of colors worn in secret. The day's warmth is fading as you find yourself in a small village just beyond the capital's reach, where the rigid formality of court life gives way to something softer, more human. The sun hangs low in the western sky, painting the horizon in shades of amber and rose that no imperial decree could ever regulate. Here, beneath the drooping branches of an ancient willow tree, you settle onto a worn wooden bench beside the village well. An elderly woman sits nearby, her weathered hands working steadily at a piece of embroidery. Her needle catches the last rays of sunlight as she speaks in hushed tones to a small circle of listeners: village children, a young mother, and a traveling merchant like yourself. Her voice carries the weight of years, each word chosen carefully, as if she understands that some stories are too dangerous to tell loudly, even here in this peaceful place. There was a time, she begins, her voice barely above a whisper, when my grandmother wore yellow. The words hang in the air like incense, sacred and forbidden all at once. The children lean closer, their eyes wide with the kind of wonder that comes from hearing something both beautiful and dangerous. Not the bright yellow of the emperor's robes, she continues, but the softer yellow of spring wheat, hidden beneath her outer garments where only she would know. You listen as the story unfolds, gentle as the evening breeze that stirs the willow's trailing branches. The woman's grandmother had been a seamstress, skilled in the art of dyeing fabric with flowers and roots gathered from the mountainsides. She had discovered a way to coax a pale, golden hue from the petals of winter jasmine, a color so subtle it might have been mistaken for cream in certain lights, yet unmistakably yellow to those who knew how to look. The old woman's needle pauses in its rhythm as she describes how her grandmother would wear this secret garment, a simple undershirt dyed with jasmine petals, during the most important moments of her life. When she married, when her children were born, when she said goodbye to loved ones departing for distant lands. It was her way of carrying a piece of the divine with her, a quiet rebellion that harmed no one yet fed something deep within her soul. She never spoke of it, the storyteller continues, her voice growing even softer as the shadows lengthen. But sometimes, when she worked in the garden or bent to tend the fire, I would catch a glimpse of that golden edge beneath her brown robes. It was like seeing sunlight through clouds, there and gone in an instant, but bright enough to warm the heart. A young boy in the circle asks what happened to the grandmother, his voice small and careful. The woman smiles, expression both sad and proud. She lived to be very old, child. The color brought her joy, and perhaps that joy gave her strength. When the officials came through the village, checking for forbidden dyes and illegal silks, they found nothing but the humble browns and grays that marked her as a common woman. Her secret remained safe, tucked away like a precious jewel. The story shifts then, carried by another voice, the young mother, who speaks of her own aunt, a woman who had served briefly in a merchant's household in the capital. This aunt had developed a passion for a particular shade of purple, not the deep imperial purple that was strictly forbidden, but a lighter hue that danced on the edge of acceptability. She had learned to create it from the berries of a common shrub, mixed with a touch of indigo and iron-rich mud from the riverbank. She would wear it only at night, the mother explains, her baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. A simple sash around her waist, hidden beneath her sleeping robes. She said it made her dreams more vivid, filled with colors that didn't exist in the waking world. She claimed it connected her to the spirits of poets and painters, to all the beauty that the laws tried to contain. The merchant beside you nods knowingly and adds his own whispered tale. Years ago, he had encountered a young scholar who had been caught wearing a belt dyed with safflower, a deep, rich red that approached the sacred vermilion of temples and palaces. The punishment had been gentle, as these things went, a fine, a public warning, and the confiscation of the offending garment. But the scholar had accepted it all with remarkable grace, claiming that the few months he had worn the forbidden color had been worth any consequence. He said it helped him understand the poems he was studying, the merchant recalls, his voice barely audible above the evening breeze. Something about how the ancient masters wrote of colors they could never wear, how they poured their longing into verse instead of cloth. He wanted to feel what they felt, to understand the weight of that beauty he could only dream of possessing. As the stories continue, you begin to understand that these acts of rebellion were never about challenging authority directly. They were quieter than that, more personal. A farmer who dyed his festival cap with the faintest touch of yellow saffron, telling himself it was merely golden brown. A young woman who embroidered her wedding veil with threads that caught the light in ways that suggested imperial colors without quite achieving them. A monk who grew certain flowers in his garden not for their beauty alone, but for the way their petals, when crushed, would stain his fingers with forbidden hues. The elderly woman returns to her embroidery, and you notice that she works with threads of the most carefully chosen colors, deep blues that never quite become purple, reds that stop just short of vermilion, yellows so pale they might pass for white in dim light. Each stitch is an act of artistry constrained by law, yet somehow made more beautiful by those very constraints. The truth is, she says, her voice growing contemplative as the first stars appear in the darkening sky, most of us never truly broke the color laws. We bent them, perhaps. We found the spaces between the rules and made our homes there. We learned to love the colors we were allowed to have, and to dream of the ones we could not. A gentle breeze stirs the dust at your feet, carrying with it the scent of night-blooming flowers and the smoke of cooking fires. The village settles into evening calm, and you realize that these stories of quiet rebellion are themselves like hidden colors, beautiful, treasured, and shared only in whispers among those who understand their value. The young mother speaks again, her voice dreamy with approaching sleep. My daughter will grow up in a world where colors have meanings she may never fully understand. Perhaps that's for the best. Perhaps the laws that seem so harsh to us are really just another way of making beauty sacred, of ensuring that some things remain too precious to be common. An old man who has been silent until now finally speaks, his voice rusty with age but warm with memory. I once knew a painter who mixed his own pigments. He would take the approved colors, the browns and grays, the simple blues and greens, and blend them with such skill that they seemed to shimmer with forbidden hues. In certain lights, his paintings appeared to contain colors that didn't exist in his palette. It was magic, perhaps, or simply the work of a man who understood that true beauty often lies in what we imagine rather than what we see. The stories begin to wind down as the evening deepens, but their echoes linger in the cooling air. You learn of a weaver who created patterns so intricate that they seem to generate their own colors, of a dyer who could make common indigo appear royal blue simply by changing how the light fell across the cloth, of a grandmother who taught her granddaughter to see purple in the deepest shadows of blue fabric. These were not criminals or revolutionaries, but ordinary people who found ways to touch the divine through color while remaining within the bounds of imperial law. Their rebellions were measured in threads and hidden stitches, in the secret knowledge of which flowers bloomed in which seasons, in the careful cultivation of beauty that existed only in the spaces between strict rules. As the night deepens around the village, you understand that the true power of the color laws lay not in their ability to restrict, but in their capacity to make beauty rare and therefore precious. Every small act of creative rebellion, every hidden thread of forbidden hue, every secret garden of specially chosen flowers, These were not crimes against the state, but love letters to beauty itself. The old woman gathers up her embroidery, her fingers tracing the careful patterns she has created with her legally approved threads. "Tomorrow," she says quietly, "I'll begin a new piece. Perhaps something with just a touch more yellow in the thread, or maybe a blue that catches the light in an interesting way. One must always be pushing gently against the boundaries, you understand. That's how we keep the colors alive." As the village settles into sleep, we turn to the poet's words. Summary. Enter the tranquil world of Tang Dynasty poets, where colors bloom in verse as vibrant as any dye, and discover how scholars used words to paint the hues they could never wear. Peaceful opening. You sit by a scholar's desk, the scent of ink and paper lingering in the air, as candlelight dances across scrolls filled with verses that capture colors more vivid than any silk. The scholar's study is a sanctuary of quiet contemplation, tucked away in a corner of the city where the noise of merchants and craftsmen fades to a gentle murmur. Paper screens filter the late afternoon light into soft, golden rectangles that fall across low wooden tables laden with scrolls, inkstones, and brushes of varying sizes. The air carries the distinctive fragrance of pine ink mixed with the earthy scent of handmade paper, creating an atmosphere that seems to slow time itself. You settle onto a silk cushion beside Master Chun, an elderly poet whose reputation for capturing the essence of color in verse has drawn students from across the empire. His hair, white as winter clouds, is pulled back in a simple knot, and his robes are the muted brown of autumn leaves, the humble garments of a scholar who has chosen words over worldly wealth. Before him lies an open scroll, its surface covered with delicate calligraphy that seems to shimmer in the wavering candlelight. "Poetry," he says softly, his voice carrying the measured cadence of one who has spent decades choosing words with the same care a painter selects pigments, "is the one realm where all colors are permitted. Here, in the landscape of verse, even a humble scholar may dress the emperor in gold, paint temples in forbidden vermilion, and scatter purple across the evening sky like scattered jewels." He dips his brush in the ink stone, the soft grinding sound of stone against stone creating a rhythm as soothing as distant rain. With practiced movements, he begins to write, each character flowing into the next like water finding its natural course. "Listen," he whispers, and begins to recite. Golden robes of morning mist wrap the mountain peaks in silk, while vermilion birds dance through gardens of jade and pearl. The words seem to paint themselves in the air between you, conjuring images more vivid than any tapestry. In the realm of poetry, the forbidden golden yellow of imperial robes becomes the natural gold of sunrise, transformed by metaphor into something both beautiful and permissible. The sacred vermilion reserved for temples and palaces becomes the brilliant red of birds in flight, carrying the same visual power without challenging imperial authority. Another student, a young woman with ink-stained fingers, looks up from her own scroll. "Master," she asks, her voice barely above a whisper, "how do the great poets manage to make us see colors so clearly when they write only in black ink?" Master Chen smiles, setting down his brush with deliberate care. "The secret lies in understanding that color is not merely what meets the eye, but what touches the heart." When Li Bai writes of silver moonlight spilling like water across jade stairs, he creates not just the image of light on stone, but the feeling of coolness, of purity, of something precious made common by its very abundance. He reaches for another scroll, this one bearing the work of Du Fu, and begins to read in a voice that carries the gentle authority of years spent in contemplation. Peach blossoms drift like pink snow, settling on the poet's sleeve, while spring's green fingers paint the willow's hanging hair. The verse unfolds in your mind like a painting coming to life. You can almost see the delicate pink petals falling through the air, feel their silky touch against fabric. The green of spring becomes not just a color but a living force, an artist's hand shaping the world with deliberate beauty. In poetry, colors become actors in their own right, each hue carrying emotional weight that goes far beyond its physical appearance. An elderly woman enters the study, moving with the quiet grace of someone accustomed to scholarly spaces. She carries a tray of tea, the ceramic cups a soft blue-gray that seems to capture the color of twilight clouds. As she serves the fragrant jasmine tea, Master Chen introduces her as Lady Wang, a poet in her own right, known for her ability to weave colors into verses about domestic life. The common colors, Lady Wang says, settling gracefully onto a cushion, hold their own poetry. When I write of the deep blue of indigo-dyed cloth, I'm not just describing a color. I'm capturing the patient work of the dyer, the cool touch of wet fabric, the way that blue seems to hold the depth of evening skies within its threads. She takes up her own brush and begins to write, her characters flowing with a fluid grace that speaks of years of practice. Indigo sleeves catch the breeze, blue as the heart of evening, while brown earth cradles the seeds of tomorrow's green. The words create a gentle landscape in your mind, one painted in the humble colors available to common people, yet no less beautiful for their simplicity. The indigo blue of everyday cloth becomes as profound as the evening sky, while the brown earth, often overlooked in favor of more dramatic hues, becomes the foundation for all life and growth. A young man near the window looks up from his copying work. "Master Chen," he says, "I've been studying the poems of Wang Wei, and I notice he often writes of colors that seem to exist only in certain lights. Purple shadows, golden mist, silver rain. How do poets capture colors that are so temporary?" Master Chen nods approvingly at the question. Wang Wei understood that the most beautiful colors are often the most fleeting. A poet's task is to preserve these moments, to give permanent form to the impermanent. When he writes of purple shadows, he's not describing a color that exists in the physical world, but one that exists in the realm of perception. The way shadows appear purple when the light is just right, when the eye is prepared to see beauty in the ordinary. He retrieves a scroll containing Wang Wei's work and reads aloud. Purple smoke rises from the distant village, while golden light pools in the spaces between bamboo leaves, and silver fish flash in the dark mirror of the pond. The verse creates a complete world, painted in colors that shift and change with the light, with the observer's mood, with the passage of time. Purple smoke, impossible in the physical world, becomes perfectly natural in the realm of poetry, where metaphor and reality blend like colors on a painter's palette. As the evening deepens, more students gather in the study, drawn by the soft murmur of voices and the gentle scratch of brushes on paper. Each brings their own understanding of color, their own way of seeing the world through the lens of verse. One speaks of the black gold of fertile soil, another of the white fire of stars, a third of the transparent blue of deep water. Lady Wang shares a poem about the colors of seasons, each stanza painted in the hues of a different time of year. Spring arrives in yellow-green, soft as a baby's first cry, while summer blazes red and gold, like a dragon's joyful dance. Autumn whispers in bronze and rust, the colors of wisdom earned, and winter sleeps in silver white, dreaming of colors yet to come. The poem captures not just the visual aspects of seasonal change, but the emotional resonance of each color. Spring's yellow-green carries the tenderness of new life, while autumn's bronze and rust speak of experience and acceptance. Winter's silver-white becomes not an absence of color, but a promise of future beauty. Master Chen explains how poets of the Tang dynasty developed an entire vocabulary of color metaphors, each carrying layers of meaning that went far beyond simple description. When a poet writes of jade-green water, he says, he's not just describing the color of a stream. He's invoking the preciousness of jade, the coolness of water, the way both catch and reflect light. The color becomes a bridge between the physical and the spiritual worlds. A student asks about the famous poem by Li Shangyin, known for its mysterious and beautiful color imagery. Master Chen smiles and recites from memory. The brocade zither has 50 strings, each recalling a golden year, while purple butterflies dream of fields they've never seen, and blue birds carry messages written in the language of wind. The verse creates a dreamscape where colors exist independent of their physical limitations. Purple butterflies, impossible in nature, become symbols of imagination itself, while blue birds carry the hopes and dreams of mortals to the realm of the divine. As the candles burn lower, their light creating dancing shadows on the walls, the conversation turns to the way poets use color to express emotions that have no other voice. Sorrow becomes the gray of winter rain, joy transforms into the gold of sunrise, love appears as the red of peonies in full bloom. In poetry, colors become the vocabulary of the heart, allowing writers to speak of feelings too deep for ordinary words. The evening concludes with Master Chen reading a poem of his own creation, one that captures the essence of their scholarly gathering. In the lamp's golden circle, words bloom like flowers. each color a doorway to worlds beyond seeing, where beauty lives eternal in the heart of the observer. As the candle dims, we reach the end of an era. Summary. Witness the gentle transformation of an empire as the Tang dynasty slowly gives way to new traditions, and discover how the meaning of colors evolved with the changing times, like autumn leaves shifting from green to gold. Peaceful opening. You walk a quiet road, the empire bathed in the glow of a golden sunset, as the great Tang dynasty settles into its twilight years like an elderly scholar laying down his brush. The road stretches before you like a silk ribbon unwinding across the landscape, its worn stones polished smooth by countless feet over the centuries. The sun hangs low in the western sky, casting everything in shades of amber and rose that seem to soften the edges of the world. You are traveling away from Chang'an now, leaving behind the great capital as it enters what will be remembered as the twilight of the Tang dynasty, though few who live through these gentle changes understand the magnitude of what is quietly unfolding. The year is 880 CE, and the empire that once stretched from the Korean peninsula to the borders of Persia is beginning to fragment like an old silk scroll, its edges fraying not with violence, but with the slow inevitability of time. The color laws that once governed every thread and dye pot with imperial precision are beginning to loosen, not through revolution or decree, but through the simple erosion of authority that comes when power spreads too thin across too vast a territory. You pause at a small roadside inn, where the proprietor greets you with the relaxed courtesy of someone who has learned to adapt to changing times. His robes, you notice, carry subtle variations that would have been impossible 50 years ago. A sash that borders on the forbidden purple, a collar edged with threads that catch the light in ways that suggest imperial gold without quite achieving it. These are not acts of rebellion, but signs of a world where the old certainties are slowly dissolving like ink in water. Inside the inn, you settle beside a brazier where coals glow with the deep red of cinnabar, their warmth welcome as the evening air grows cool. Other travelers gather around the fire, their conversations creating a gentle murmur that speaks of journeys both personal and historical. An elderly merchant spreads his wares on a low table, displaying bolts of silk and colors that tell the story of the changing times. "These blues," he says, running his weathered fingers across a length of deep indigo cloth, "come from the western provinces now. The old trade routes through the north have become unreliable. But see how rich the color remains? The dyers there have learned techniques that make even common indigo appear royal." His voice carries no bitterness, only the pragmatic acceptance of someone who has learned to find beauty in adaptation. A young woman examines a piece of silk dyed in a shade that hovers between red and purple, a color that previous generations would have approached with extreme caution. "My grandmother would have called this dangerous," she muses, her voice thoughtful rather than critical. But times change, and perhaps the spirits have grown more forgiving of such things. She purchases the cloth with the easy confidence of someone who no longer fears the color inspectors who once patrolled the markets with such diligence. As the evening deepens, the inn fills with the kind of quiet stories that emerge when travelers find themselves far from the formal structures of court life. A retired official speaks of his years in the capital, describing how the great ceremonies gradually became less rigid, how the emperor's robes began to incorporate subtle variations that would have been unthinkable in the dynasty's golden age. "It wasn't that the laws changed," he explains, his voice carrying the measured tones of someone who has spent decades navigating the complexities of imperial bureaucracy. "Rather, they became softer, like a river that gradually shifts its course over many seasons. The boundaries remained, but they grew less precise, more open to interpretation. A Buddhist monk, his robes the traditional saffron that has remained unchanged through all the political upheavals, offers a different perspective. In the monasteries," he says, "we began to see pilgrims arriving in garments that spoke of changing times. Merchants from the southern provinces wearing colors that would have marked them as foreigners in the capital. Farmers whose festival clothes incorporated dyes that suggested prosperity and confidence. The great wheel of change turns for all things, including the meanings we assign to the colors that surround us." The conversation drifts to the provincial courts, where local rulers have begun to develop their own traditions of color and ceremony. A traveling artist describes workshops where painters experiment with new combinations of pigments, creating hues that exist in the spaces between the classical categories. They call it evening purple, she says, describing a color that emerges when certain blues and reds are mixed in precise proportions under specific lighting conditions. It's neither imperial purple nor common violet, but something entirely new, a color for changing times. As the night deepens, an elderly storyteller takes up his position by the fire, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has witnessed the slow transformation of an empire. He speaks of the great cities of the Tang, describing how their markets have evolved over the decades, how the rigid hierarchies of color have given way to more fluid expressions of beauty and status. In Luoyang, he says, I saw a festival where the lanterns displayed colors that would have been impossible in the early days of the dynasty. Not because the laws had changed, but because the meaning of the colors had shifted. What once spoke of rebellion now whispered of creativity. What once challenged authority now simply celebrated the joy of being alive in a world where beauty takes many forms. The storyteller's tales paint a picture of gradual transformation, of an empire adapting to new realities with the same quiet dignity that characterizes the best of Chinese culture. The Song dynasty, which will eventually rise to replace the Tang, is already beginning to establish its own traditions of color and ceremony. Their approach, he suggests, will be different, more commercial, more open to innovation, less concerned with the rigid preservation of ancient symbols. Under the Song, he prophesies, the color laws will become more about commerce than ceremony. Certain dyes will be restricted not because they challenge imperial authority, but because they represent valuable trade goods. The purple of Tyrian dye will be controlled not for its spiritual significance, but for its economic value. It will be a different kind of order, one that speaks to the practical needs of a trading empire rather than the cosmic responsibilities of a celestial dynasty. A young scholar, traveling to take the imperial examinations, listens with the intense attention of someone whose future depends on understanding the currents of change. What will this mean for poetry? He asks. If the colors lose their forbidden nature, will they also lose their power to move the human heart? The storyteller considers this question with the gravity it deserves. Poetry, he says finally, draws its power not from what is forbidden, but from what is beautiful. The Tang poets wrote of colors they could not wear, and found in that limitation a source of creative energy. The poets of the future will face different limitations, will find different sources of inspiration. Beauty adapts, young scholar. It finds new forms, new expressions, new ways to touch the souls of those who seek it. As the evening winds down, you find yourself thinking about the cyclical nature of history, how empires rise and fall like the seasons, each bringing its own understanding of beauty, its own relationship with the colors that paint the world. The Tang dynasty, with its careful regulations and sacred restrictions, created a culture where color carried profound meaning, where every hue told a story of power and spirituality. The coming changes will bring new possibilities, dyes from distant lands, techniques that create colors never before imagined, freedoms that allow for expressions of beauty that would have been impossible under the old system. But something will also be lost, the sense of color as sacred, the understanding that some forms of beauty are too precious to be commonplace. Outside the inn, the night sky spreads like a vast scroll painted in shades of deep blue and black, studded with stars that shine with a light that belongs to no earthly palette. The moon, nearly full, bathes the landscape in silver radiance that transforms everything it touches. These are the colors that no dynasty can control, the hues that belong to the eternal realm beyond human law and custom. The inn gradually settles into sleep, its occupants dreaming perhaps of the changes that await them, of the new world that is slowly emerging from the graceful decline of the old. In their dreams, colors may dance with a freedom that daylight does not yet permit, painting landscapes of possibility that exist only in the realm of the imagination. As you prepare for sleep, you understand that you have witnessed something profound. Not the violent collapse of an empire, but its gentle transformation into something new. The colors that once carried the weight of imperial authority are gradually becoming simply beautiful, their meanings shifting like patterns in water, their power evolving from the political to the purely aesthetic. The Tang dynasty fades like watercolors in rain, its rigid structures dissolving into the more fluid forms that will characterize the centuries to come. But its legacy, the understanding that beauty and meaning are inseparable, that color carries messages deeper than words, will endure, woven into the very fabric of Chinese culture like threads of gold in precious silk. As the dynasty fades, we prepare to rest. Tonight, we've wandered through the vibrant yet tranquil world of ancient China, where colors carried the weight of empires and whispered the secrets of the divine. From the sacred yellow of imperial robes to the humble indigo of everyday cloth, from the vermilion gates of temples to the secret hues hidden beneath common garments, we've discovered a civilization where every shade told a story deeper than words. You've walked as a merchant through bustling markets where dyers worked their gentle magic, transforming roots and minerals into threads of beauty. You've witnessed the careful dance between law and longing, where poets painted forbidden colors with words, and artisans found creativity within the boundaries of ancient restrictions. You've seen how even the simplest festivals became galleries of light, where paper lanterns cast their warm glow across faces illuminated by joy and tradition. As your mind lingers in these ancient streets, let the memory of that golden sunset fade like watercolors in evening mist. Feel the weight of silk slip from your shoulders, the scent of jasmine drift away on the night breeze, the gentle sound of bamboo wind chimes grow soft and distant. The colors that once blazed so vividly in the Tang dynasty now settle into the peaceful darkness of sleep, like stars fading into dawn. Allow the stories to melt into dreams now, carrying you gently through the quiet hours ahead. Let the whispered tales of hidden yellows and secret purples become the colors of your own peaceful slumber. Feel yourself drifting away from the ancient world, back to the comfort of your own bed, your own pillow, your own moment of rest. The merchants have closed their stalls, the lanterns have dimmed, and the great Tang dynasty sleeps in the silence of history. Now it's your turn to rest, cradled by the gentle weight of these timeless stories. Thank you for joining me on this serene journey through the colors of ancient China. Until our next quiet tale, sleep deeply, dear friend. Let the beauty we've discovered together paint your dreams with the softest, most peaceful hues. Sweet dreams.